Hey guys, happy Sunday. Hey, just a quick little thought here regarding welcome to Whatsoever More or Less. My name is Jason. Just somebody who's studied a lot of Ezra Taft Benson, H. Ferlin Anderson, Dallin H. Oaks, other church leaders, and on top of that, the Federalist Papers, different books on the founders, and then finally decided to get really confident in digging into the Constitution on a daily basis. Oh, probably a year and a half ago or so, as opposed to just occasionally referencing it and trying to understand the parts. So it's become a big whole picture to me. So now let's talk about this big whole picture. Let's look at the preamble, some of the purposes for which the Constitution was established. So the purposes of the Constitution, if we talk about general welfare and common defense, for example, any tyrannical government can claim to have done that, right? Honestly, that's what they do. You can be under a tyrannical government. They'll protect their borders. They'll fight off invasions. And they'll make sure that like basic things are functioning in society, general welfare, right? That's great. Okay, so what's the biggest part? Well, I think it's in that very first verb that's used, if I'm not mistaken, in the preamble, which is form. To form a more perfect union. The form, President Oaks recently prayed for our constitutional form of government, and then without a comma, he said, and the rule of law, as if to say our constitutional form of government is the rule of law. And I'm going to make the case that it is. That the last part of the Constitution's preamble, if I'm not mistaken, is to secure to ourselves and our posterity the blessings of liberty. That was the bigger deal that we get out of that form, that constitutional form of government, is the blessings of liberty. Common defense and general welfare, yeah, every government's been doing that since forever. That's the oldest function of government in the book, okay? So let's talk about some of the things then that are so cool about the Constitution that secure the blessings of liberty, against which we should never rebel. Don't rebel against it, okay? The founders knew what they were working out. We have 3 branches of government, each with procedures to exercise enumerated powers. And if there is no procedure granted to exercise the powers to that branch of government, then it's an invalid procedure. And the procedures within them, what they constantly clarify, are thresholds of votes required in order for that procedure to be officially considered carried out into legal force. Right? This is the big deal. Even when it comes to legislation, which seems to be a simple majority thing, it's not. Because legislation has to go through a bicameral Congress. It has to go through the Senate, which is enumerated simply 2 per state. And it has to go through the House, which is based on population. Well, that's not simple majority stuff. And then to top it off, it has to go through the president. And if the president says, nah, I'm not going to do it, then they have to get a 2/3 ratio in order to bypass it. And then to top it off, even if they go through all those processes and get it all right, if it exercises a power that the Constitution didn't allow it in the first place and may have perhaps even prohibited, it's still considered invalid. Now, who's supposed to strike that down, by the way? Every level of government. This is the way the founders saw it. The oath of office and judicial court decisions, judicial opinions are often in conflict with each other. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the concept of parity. Is the text of the Constitution superior to the opinions of the judges? Yes. Are the laws written by the legislatures superior to the decisions of the judges? In that, yes, they're exercising their function. However, if the case comes before the judges and they're supposed to enforce that law, if they look at that law and say, yeah, to enforce this law would be a violation of my own oath of office, I can't enforce this law. They can't impose their reading of the Constitution on other branches of government and other members of government who have taken an oath of office to the same thing. That oath of office cannot be to the Supreme Court and simultaneously be to the text of the Constitution. It's either to one or the other. No man can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or vice versa. It has to be to the Constitution. That's what the Constitution itself says in Article 6. All right. So again here, the biggest thing that people complain about, but yeah, it's hard to get something new added that the people need when going through the Article 5 process. The Article 5 process requires either 2/3 of state legislatures or 2/3 of the Congress to even initiate the process. That's a huge ratio already. And then to pass it, you need 3/5 of the state legislatures to pass it. And if it doesn't pass, it doesn't go through. But this is the big deal. That's a very secure process. You know, when you have a passcode that you don't want somebody to hack, and you start punching in something real simple online and they tell you, yeah, that's not complicated enough, somebody's going to hack that, right? This is what the Constitution is. It was supposed to be complicated enough. If you've got a problem with the complexity, you've got a problem with securing the blessings of liberty. What you want instead is a government that'll care for you and that will tell you what you can and can't do and manage your life a lot more for you, because the two go hand in hand, unavoidably. If the government's taking care of everything for you, then they're also telling you a lot more about what you can and can't do. And that's not what the American government set up. That's not what's been approved. President Benson, now I'm going to quote President Benson, he says, government should have a limited role. Proper role of government is very few things at all. President Oaks has said, maximum freedom is required. I can point to both of them. President Benson said, can it be that the branch that David O. McKay, President McKay, said is leading us down the road to atheism is the final arbiter of the meaning of the Constitution? Surely it cannot be. And that's true, because it cannot be. Thomas Jefferson said it would make the Constitution a complete felo de se, which is, back then they saw suicide as a felony, and all of your belongings were destroyed and never passed on to any posterity at all. So he's saying it's a really bad thing. It would make the judicial branch a despotic branch, because there's no checks and balances. Nothing's written into the Constitution. They're just going to invent their own form of doing it. John Marshall was a disaster in his interpretations of the Constitution. Barron v. Baltimore saying that Amendments 2 through 9 don't apply to the states. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard. It was never meant to be, the meaning of the Constitution was never meant to be changed so easily. And so secure, that password has to be hard enough when we log into something. The Constitution is hard enough. Don't rebel against it. Don't rebel against that difficulty of the Article 5 process. Don't rebel against the difficulty of the Article 1, Section 7 process. Don't rebel against the limits of the enumerated powers and the clarity given in the 10th Amendment. Now, let's talk about parity real quick here. Okay, what's the order of the hierarchy of supremacy of laws, right? The Constitution, then laws that go through the Article 1, Section 7 process. Then the Article 5 process, which is, for all intents and purposes, on the same level as the Constitution. So then we have the later in time rule, right? Which came later in time. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 and Clause 18, or the 10th Amendment. Well, the 10th Amendment came later on in time. According to the Constitution itself, 10th Amendment is on parity with it when there is in conflict in the imagined meaning of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 or Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18 versus the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment came later on in time. That's the one that wins. This is the way you have to interpret things, right? Anyhow, don't rebel against the difficulty of the Constitution, the administrative state. It's completely illegal. It's everything they do. If you follow it and you treat it as though it's legitimate, you are complicit, right, in violating the Constitution. If you ask for more of it, you are complicit. At some point, we have to try to avoid getting arrested. That's called prudence, is what we would call that in the Declaration of Independence. But do you not understand, or if you support Supreme Court rulings, President Oaks has said we don't find inspiration in every Supreme Court ruling, while complementing simultaneously amendments. He's trying to get a point made there. He says they're ill-suited to the legislative lawmaking process. He says, oh, we all know that they're intended to be the final arbiter of the meaning of the Constitution. What does he mean when he says we all know? Who's we all, right? And who intended them to be? Well, yes, it was discussed by Hamilton and some other people like that. Never made it into the text of the document itself, right? But he's sitting there talking to law students, and he's trying to get past that and saying, do you guys not understand that when you have this winner-take-all approach to all constitutional questions all the time, all you're doing is creating a bunch of enmity, a bunch of anger at this supposed force to follow it. So once again, do not be frustrated at the difficulty of the thresholds of the Constitution. It's supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be secure. It's supposed to be a secure password. You cannot have liberty while having the government exercise beyond, a whole lot more beyond what the Constitution allowed for in the first place. All right? Government was never supposed to be that involved in our lives. And when they start getting too involved in our lives, liberty is gone. Government is enforced with an enforcement mechanism every time. And I want to testify that this is the amazing thing about the Constitution. It is completely in accord with God's plan. It is the preparatory plan. I've got quotes I'm going to be sharing from different prophets. It is the law that is to endure, that we are to defend until the day that Jesus Christ comes. Okay, so let's not make the mistake of 3 Nephi 1, where they start thinking we saw the signs of Christ's coming, we don't need to keep doing the law of Moses. We know that Christ is coming soon, and he will reign. That's true. But in the meantime, we have a responsibility to defend the Constitution. And I just want to testify of that. It's for your liberty, it's for mine, it's for everybody's. All right, you guys.